Five-star final, JCM Jones from the Mothership and DirtySouthSoccer.com. Tony Award winner Nathan Lane is still not with us. We're still working on that. We're going to get him on soon. But fortunately, Joe Patrick from 92.9 The Game, DirtySouthSoccer.com is right over there. Say hey, Joe.
I'm proud to say that I still don't understand the Nathan Lane joke, but I'm happy to chuckle along and humor you as you make the joke, Sam. So I hope that's entertaining. But yeah, I'm good. We were just talking before we launched this show before we started this episode that we haven't done a podcast in about a month, and nowadays a month feels like a year. It feels like we need to catch up on what's going on in each other's lives, and do you have kids by now in the month since we last spoke?
Yes, one is named Tony, the other is named Lane.
Twins, nice.
You're gonna get that joke eventually. It's gonna be great.
I'll have to Google it after this episode.
I barely get it, but I'm very glad to be talking to you about it at the very least. We had originally planned to go ahead and do a show on Friday. Then we had some sad breaking news. I'm sure you've heard, if you are in Atlanta, that Hank Aaron passed away at age 86. And the reason we're talking about that on a soccer show is because I don't think there is any athlete in the history of the city that is more iconic, more associated with the city, and more integral to the experience as an Atlanta sports fan. So Joe had to go cover that for a little bit. And for me personally, I had to kind of collect myself, have a good little cry for a second, and kind of repace myself. But I do want to commend everyone in the Blank family and everything like that they go ahead and retire Hank Aaron's number 44 on both the Falcons and Atlanta United and Atlanta United 2 for this season. I'm not sure if anything else is in the works, but drove by Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the first time forever the other night just because I kind of wanted to, and they had the Halo board lit up with Hank Aaron's name and likeness and everything like that in commemoration of that. So sad news, but I don't know. I think it's important to remember who he was and the impact he had on the city, and continue that spirit as we kind of go throughout the rest of the year.
If I could just add one thing, I totally agree with all that. It's kind of, when I moved to Atlanta when I was a kid, I moved here when I was like 7 or something like that. And it's like becoming a Braves fan. It was just the Braves and Hank Aaron were just like synonymous, like one and the same. And so it was kind of like losing a piece of, kind of just like a legend, really. And I got to say, I was super, flattered or honored to have been part of this press conference that they did on Friday. The Braves put together, having Brian Snicker and Chipper Jones come on and talk about him. It was just amazing to hear the stories and just evidence of what an amazing person that Hank Aaron was. Like, honestly, most of the press conference was not even talking about him as a baseball player. It was more about talking about him as just like a mentor and everything that he represented. So it was a cool experience, and hopefully everybody got a chance to kind of really cherish his life, and hopefully everybody can represent him well going forward.
So there you go. There's a quick hit on that. We just wanted to mention it. We'd be remiss if we didn't, because again, like I said, I don't think anyone looms larger in Atlanta sports history than him. So besides that, there have been a whole lot of other things that have happened in the month or so since me and Joe have last talked. And a couple of things have already gone down this morning. Gabriel Heinze is in Atlanta. I'm not sure if he stopped at the Bojangles and Concourse T at Hartsville-Jackson, but I'm hoping he did as part of a player and coach hospitality measure.
There was a, I cannot remember the name of the restaurant, but I heard from a fan who lived in the condo complex that Tata Martino lived in when he was the coach here. And there was it's like in a strip mall, essentially. And there's like a restaurant in the strip mall. It's like, it's just like some chain, classic American chain restaurant, not like one of the popular ones like Applebee's or Fridays or something like that, but I forget what it was called anyway. And he would like love to go there and just have like I imagine like a plate of like steak nachos or something. So I wonder if that's what Heinze is going to be feasting on over his 2 years here.
Tata Martino remains a man of the people. And speaking of you, the people, we're trying to get a bit back to our roots, I think, here going forward throughout the rest of the year. We started off as a show that was for the people, took a lot of questions, stuff like that. We kind of gotten away from that, but Joe, I think we have some plans in the works to maybe revert to a Tata Martina era level of SFF.
There may be people there may be people who don't even know where like the name comes from, like the Five Stripe Final.
I barely do.
And you came up with it. Yeah, it was like the reason we came up with this was like to like at the final whistle, to have the podcast, and we don't necessarily go directly after games anymore, but yeah, we're still just kind of playing it by ear, in terms of when we record. We don't want to force ourselves to put out a podcast. So just when we feel like there's enough, news around the team, then we'll do that. So right now we don't really have a lot of contact. We don't really have a lot of news to share other than obviously what's been made public, which is why we're recording today. But as training camp gets going, as we start talking to players and things like that, we will start to do more regular recordings. And then of course, once the season actually starts, we will be doing our weekly thing as usual. So, and we've got a lot more coming to you this year as well. Starting with this episode, we're going to be publishing on YouTube, so you can see our ugly ass faces on YouTube talk about this, say the same exact words. But there are some shows that I listen to on YouTube as like podcasts. I just throw it on and let it play. So if that's your thing, we'll be there for you. And if you want to do that, just subscribe to us at Dirty South Soccer on YouTube. We do actually have a YouTube channel, so just subscribe to us, hit the little bell so you know when a show's out. Those shows might come out like a day or two after the pod. We'll try to get them up as soon as possible, but sometimes we do these things late at night and there's work to do, and so it'll kind of be lower on the priority list. And there's going to be lots more coming your way. Hopefully we'll be able to announce it here shortly. We have some big plans for this year. So yeah, it's all very exciting. New era of Five Stripe Final along with Atlanta United.
Good tease. I'm excited about this. I'm interested in seeing how this goes. I also forgot that we were on camera for this one. So I've probably already done something really stupid that's going to get me memed or something like that going forward. We should mention that we're assuming that training camp is about to start. There has been apparently some progress as far as discussions between the MLSPA and the MLS owners, although they do seem to enjoy taking some shots at each other in public. I think it's a lot of posturing and maybe not as much bite behind the scenes, if my gut is correct. But it seems like we're going to get a season starting at least somewhat on the normal time schedule. Right now, the plan is still to get that started in March. We did have an announcement of CONCACAF Champions League stuff, though. We do know for sure when that is starting. Looks like the first week in April. I believe it's April 6th to the 8th. That round of 16 will start. And of course, Atlanta United, as you know, earned and gritted and just toughed out a way to join the four MLS teams that will be participating in the CONCACAF Champions League. So we will be participating in that with some new additions to the squad. Joe Patrick.
If the Campeones Cup got us into Champions League twice, then maybe I have been underplaying the merit of the Campeones Cup. I'm looking forward to it. Like, I feel like it's undeserved, but I'm not going to turn it down. And I think that Atlanta United is going to have a good run in it. I think that, we were very critical of this team last year, obviously, but I'm very optimistic. Maybe it's just the optimistic mood I've been in the last week or 2 weeks. Just with, it seems like things in life are generally slowly starting to get better, and I'm just trying to embrace that. So, Champions League final, we're headed there. That's where we're going.
I haven't decided if it's actually getting better or if the Stockholm Syndrome is finally setting in through all of this. But you're right. It does seem a little more positive. It also seems positive once we kind of get a little more news trickling in about some signings, about some front office folks coming back to Atlanta United. And I think maybe the most important of all of them is Paul McDonough is back with Atlanta United. And it's hard. It was hard to articulate why it was important when he left, and it's somewhat hard to articulate why it's important that he's back, but it is.
I mean, we all know that he's a guy who is, pretty much the best at what he does, right? Of what he's known for,
which is getting Mikey Ambrose.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Ambrose, just like the fact that he is on probably like the minimum salary So is Lisandro Lopez, who we'll talk about in a second, is also on the minimum. These are the deals we're seeing right now. Players who are going to be on the minimum salaries or DPs just because their costs in terms of what they're going to cost on the salary budget are known. While these two sides work out what's going to happen in terms of salary structure and all that stuff. But anyway, to Paul McDonough, yeah, I mean, I think it's huge. I think that honestly, not only is he the best at what he does, but I think his arrival puts Carlos Bocanegra back into a position where Carlos can really focus on, what he's really competent at, I think, which is, his I always got the feeling that Carlos Bocanegra was kind of like the leader of the recruitment.
I was about to say recruiting coordinator, Carlos Bocanegra.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like he was probably one of the ones who was in close contact with Gabriel Heinze, which, by the way, bear with me as I try to pronounce that name right, because Heinze was stuck in my head for years. But yeah, I mean, I think that it just puts everybody in the front office in a more comfortable position that more aligns with their competencies. So, it's obviously going to be huge for this team. Paul McDonough helped put together the teams that Atlanta United fans have known and loved for so long. So, the returns on that might not be immediate, but I think that you'll just start to see the benefits of it as the team progresses for the coming years.
What's obviously interesting about this is he's coming from Inter Miami, a club that perhaps didn't meet a lot of the lofty standards that folks had set for him. Everyone was kind of thinking South Beach LAFC. Hasn't quite hit there yet, but I'm not quite sure that was totally on the roster building. You have a coach who came in and seemed largely disinterested. You still see Paul McDonough go out and get Blasima Tweede on a TAM deal, I think it was.
TAM deal.
Yeah, not even a DP spot. And of course, bringing in Gonzalo Higuain as well. And those two were not spectacular, but if you have the chance to work the roster to make that possible, you have to kind of take that chance, especially with what he was able to do those two. So it's not like he was sitting around and not putting together a team that wasn't going to be, on paper, was very, very solid. Even Rodolfo Pizarro underperformed in a lot of cases. Their best player just happened to randomly be a Scottish dude named Lewis Morgan. But he still put together a really, really solid team. And it just didn't quite work out. And he probably saw the writing on the wall towards the end of his tenure there, knew what was coming, maybe knew that a Phil Neville-sized cloud was about to be hanging over the organization. And I think he seemed pretty willing to come back to Atlanta, which is good. I think it's great that you can have a break with someone like that and still have them want to come back and be a part of the organization. I'm sure they bumped up his offer sheet a little bit this time. They said, please come back. And he knew that this is going to be a good situation in Atlanta and obviously see some potential here with what we're doing. It also continues to be a wonderful pandering thing to the rest of us. We're like, man, I wish it was more like 2017. And then they go out and literally do things they did in 2017. It's kind of nice, honestly. It makes me feel comfortable and warm and nostalgic for things of yesteryear.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think it's great that he's comfortable coming back. It just shows that Atlanta United is a place that is attractive, that somebody would be willing to come back to after the circumstances in which he left. And I think it's probably, like, in terms of the title, it's probably a step down for McDonough, but in terms of the quality of life, the success that the team he thinks can have under him, which he's proven before here, I think that those are all step ups. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what matters. I've shared this story, I think, a couple times, but I just do want to just say it one more time. It was one of the most heartwarming things I've ever seen as covering this team. It was after some game in 2018. I can't remember what game, but after the game, Joseph Martinez, Miguel Almiron were in the locker room, and Paul McDonough came in with his kids, and his kid went up to Miguel, and Miguel started chasing him around the circle, or the kid went up to Miguel and pointed to the back of his shirt and showed him that he was wearing a Joseph Martinez shirt. And then Miguel started chasing him around. He's like, "Yeah!" And he started chasing him around. Then he picked him up, and it was great. And you could see Paul laughing about it in the back. It was just family club. Oh, so nice. So good to see that he'll be back, and maybe his kids will be back in the locker room too. Who knows?
It's a family club, and this is also a family show. So I'm going to warn anybody before I read what Joe Patrick has written down in our show sheet as the next topic. It says Heinze interview in La Nacion. What stuck out to you? Question mark, parentheses. That's what she said. Parentheses, parentheses. God dang it. So thanks, Joe, for clarifying that there.
You're welcome.
Yep. So in addition to having Paul back, we also have the news that Heinze is back in Atlanta. As soon as that happens, though, we get this excellent interview in La Nacion. It's a phenomenal Q&A that's very, very long. I'm shocked how long it was that they just said, screw it, we're going to run the whole thing. We are working, I think me and Joe both, with a English translation of it, which is a little clunky at times. But there are plenty of fascinating things in there, from everything from Heinze's recruitment to Gabriel Heinze's personal wine brand.
And an unabashed cigarette smoker.
Really?
I missed that. It was right at the beginning. It was like he sits with his wine and his cigarettes, which I really appreciate. But I thought it's really a fascinating interview. Everybody should go check it out. We have a link to it on Dirty South Soccer in the story, and read the whole thing for sure. I think the most interesting thing about it is just on a very broad scale, which is like how he's reckoning with not being a player anymore and becoming a coach, and kind of the differences between those two jobs, and the fact that he has to kind of change modes a little bit in terms of being he recognizes that he's not like part of the locker room anymore. As much as he wishes he could associate himself with that group, he has to kind of, keep some distance between him and his players. And I think that that's a really kind of interesting thing that I'm sure tons of young managers have to grapple with, especially managers who have been really, really successful players like Gabriel Heinze has been. So to me, that was kind of the most interesting thing about it. And he kind of talks about it in various aspects throughout the interview, but thought that was really interesting and a good insight into just kind of the, he's very kind of brash, or doesn't like give a lot to media, like in press conference type situations, but you can tell he really is like a thinker about a lot of these kinds of things.
You mentioned the media influence as well. Seems to maybe have some disdain for him. I kind of get that. I think I'm sure that experiencing South American media and English media and everything like that for as long as he has will deter anybody from being too lovey-dovey about the media. But hopefully we can be kinder. I think we're going to be friends. I am interested to see how he reacts to a lot of us. I really, really am, once we kind of get going and get back to a normal situation. But none of it will matter if he's winning games, because no one will care about us, right? So it'll be interesting for sure. But he was very candid in this interview. He seemed open. He seemed good in the press conference. And the most interesting thing that I picked up from the interview was the discussion about his recruitment. And we wondered for a long time about why we weren't hearing anything at all with this coaching search. Remember with the Frank de Boer search, we heard a number of names. There were lots of people being thrown around, and then eventually de Boer came out of the woodwork to be the leader. With this one, we had radio silence for 3-4 months, it felt like. And it appears to be because when Darren and Carlos went to Heinze, they gave him the pitch. He said, "Can I have some time?" And they said, "Sure." And they said, "We're not going to talk to anyone else, not to anyone else, until this is done." So 3 months passed.
They were chaste. They were, or they were celibate during the
yes, exactly,
during the intervening time.
Exactly. So 3 months of that. And so eventually Heinze comes around and says, "This is a project I want to be a part of." And I think them giving him that space and them allowing him to sort through things and not go after everyone else, and so that he was the guy from the very beginning, is both encouraging for their relationship and encouraging for our perspectives on them. Because we worried, I think we worried a bit about just not hearing anything. We wondered what was up with that. And I think I mentioned, and I'll admit to being wrong here, considering the circumstances, was that they should at least put something out there to keep us entertained. But if they'd done that, maybe, they screw up the entire thing. So I'm an idiot, as always. But they did the right thing, and they did the right thing, and they immediately found the guy that seemed correct, according to pretty much everyone, and hopefully will be. So kudos to them. Kudos to Heinze for not dismissing MLS outright. They talk a bit about that in the interview as well, that he has been disregarded a bit for doing that. I think the phrasing was that Heinze is going to disappear. And I I don't think that's a proper reading of what this job has become and what MLS is right now. But I understand why folks in South America maybe not be as in tune to that right now.
Totally agree.
Remember, you can fail at this job and then go be the head coach of the Dutch national team. You can do that.
And I mean, this is a whole different conversation that we don't have to get into the weeds in right now, but it really is fascinating to see the way that MLS is kind of, their reputation is increasing, but that reputation is built on the fact that they're poaching a lot of talent from this part of the world. And it's only going to continue with this with this under 22 initiative. What you're going to see, what I think we're going to see, is MLS teams just hoovering up this young talent, because basically Paul Tenorio had some more reporting earlier in January about this U22 initiative. And basically what it's going to be is that teams can spend an unlimited amount on acquisition costs for a U22 player. So like transfer fee, you can spend an unlimited amount on these 3 players as long as their salaries are below that maximum threshold that would make them a TAM player. So basically you can just go out there and spend a lot to bring in players who are going to fit in your budget, and teams with the owners who are willing to spend, like we're seeing with Atlanta and Arthur Blank, those teams are going to take advantage of that. And so it's really interesting. I'm going to post an article in the show notes from the New York Times that who did it? Because I've got it pulled up here. I want to quote the author. It was Rory Smith, who's their big football lead writer. Talked about how the talent pool in Argentina is drying up and kind of why that is. It's an interesting look at kind of what's happening, and Argentina is really falling behind some of the other nations, or at least lost their standing of where they used to be in South America. So it's kind of related to all of this. So I'll put that in the show notes for everybody to check out. Good read.
Well, not quite a U22 signing. In fact, the opposite of that has occurred for Atlanta United already, but at least it's from Argentina. Lisandro Lopez announced officially today he comes in from Racing Club. He also comes in as a 37-year-old striker. He's, like Joe said, he's going to be on the minimum salary, and kind of feels like can we call him a player coach? Is that what this is?
I think so. I think that is kind of what he's going to be. I mean, without obviously having that title or anything like that. I mean, because here's the thing, like he's 37 years old. He can play minutes, but he's not going to be able to play large amounts of minutes consecutively. So if there was a situation where Joseph Martinez were to go down again, it's not like Lisandro Lopez is the guy who would come in to replace him for X amount of games. It would probably be an Eric Lopez or even a Jackson Conway, I would think would get would start games before a guy like Lisandro Lopez. But it's nice to have a guy like Lisandro Lopez to come off the bench. I mean, and again, he's such a proven player in Europe. He's scored, I think, 244 league goals in his career. He's played in the Champions League. He's won league titles with Porto, with Lyon. So he's a really experienced player who's going to, a lot of these players who are on the team will, be well aware of what he's accomplished in his career. They will probably have watched him growing up. So I think he's a great kind of piece to add. And certainly I think you get more utility out of a guy like Lisandro Lopez versus Adam John, who basically he's coming to take kind of his spot on the roster.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they kind of sort all that out eventually, if they do plan to use Lisandro for real minutes. I don't think there's enough room anymore for someone like John, and I would think he'd be the odd man out here with Conway and Lopez coming in.
Here's the thing with Lisandro Lopez. I feel like we're gonna have to say Lisandro Lopez and Eric Lopez every time. So we need some nicknames. If anybody has nicknames, please send them to us that we can start using, so that we don't have to use so many syllables. But I don't know. See, the thing with Lopez that kind of does confound me a bit on the pitch is that, again, it comes down to Jackson Conway. I'm really high on Jackson Conway. Anybody who's kind of heard me do the Atlanta United 2 reports, this is when I've been kind of talking him up all last season. And, he scored in that game against Club America, which was pretty cool. Like he came right in and scored on his first or second touch of he had in that game. So if you're looking at a situation where Atlanta United's leading by 2 goals or comfortably at the end of a game, last 10 minutes, you want to get Joseph off. I'd rather put Jackson Conway in that situation than Lisandro Lopez. I'd rather just have him be getting MLS minutes, getting that experience. If you're if you're losing, Lisandro Lopez in the last 10 minutes would be the better guy to throw on. I don't know. I think it'll be really interesting to see who is the more effective player on the field at this point in their careers, whether it's Lisandro Lopez or Jackson Conway. And I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous to say out loud, considering what Lopez has done in his career. And the fact that he was like, we were talking to Teodo Football about it, one of our friends who writes for Dirty South Soccer, and he was saying that he was an elite player in Argentina back in 2016, but that was 5 years ago. So he has kind of dropped off since then, and it'll just be interesting to see what he can actually provide on the pitch. But even if he's providing really nothing on the field, I still think that he's a very useful player to have in the squad.
Lisandro, not the only official signing Atlanta does grab a homegrown, as well as a couple of draft picks. And I think we start with the homegrown. Joe, what can you tell us as someone who follows the twos way more closely than I do? What can you tell us about Machop Chol?
Well,
other than the fact that he's named after a really cool person.
I don't know actually that much about him, to be honest. If anybody wants to learn more about him, Greg Gouder, who writes for us, I think his avatar or his name is Film Fan.
Yes, that's correct.
On Dirty South Soccer, knows Machop very well in terms of his play on the field, follows the academy really closely, and knows all about him. So I would definitely defer to him in terms of what he offers. What I think is really interesting about this signing is kind of the way that it really kind of proves as a proof of concept of how you can use the collegiate system as like an extension of your academy, right? Like if you have an academy player who's set to graduate at 18 years old, you don't necessarily have to sign them to a homegrown player deal. You can let them go and continue their development in college. And I think that in the case of Machop Chol, he's a guy who is like tall, lanky. He just needed some more time to really kind of get that playing time. He has professional weight facilities at an esteemed university like Wake Forest where he can improve his body. Those types of things can be really helpful for a young player. And I think for Atlanta United, it just gives them a little bit more time, gives them a little bit more flexibility on the timeline of what homegrowns they want to bring into the squad and things like that. And it just gives them more time to assess how good these players are and how they perform at that level. So I just think that it's really an interesting signing from that perspective, that it's just kind of an extension of the way they can use their academy. And Carlos Bocanegra said he would have been a top 15 pick in the draft if he were eligible.
Yeah, you got to kind of learn to game the system a little bit. And I think the platonic ideal of what you actually want to do in these kind of things is exactly what Philadelphia has done, in just jettisoning every single draft pick in exchange for money, and using your homegrowns to facilitate everything else. But Atlanta tried to do this essentially and failed at it in a good way, which, like, anyone coming to Atlanta United and failing up is kind of an MO at this point over the last year and a half, it feels like. But Atlanta United gets rid of their first round draft pick to DC for $125K in GAM, some other allocation money kind of stuff. Was projected to take this kid, Josh Bauer, at 5. Didn't do that, obviously, because they traded the pick. Hung out for a while, showed up at pick 31. Josh Bauer is still just sitting there, hanging out, playing on like a Nintendo DS or something while he's just waiting for Atlanta United to come pick him up. So Atlanta United does get the player they actually want in the draft. It's a center back. Again, his name's Josh Bauer. He's from the University of New Hampshire, Mac kid. And again, every indication was that this was a guy that the teams were going to want, that he was the best center back in the draft, is what Travis Clark from Pro Soccer USA, or Top Door Soccer, said about him. And he's extremely well connected to these kind of things. So a win for Atlanta United, even when they were trying to go against the grain.
Yeah, you got decent talent. And I think with both of these players, even though Josh Bauer was projected to be the best center back in the draft and whatnot, both of these guys are definitely just kind of, you throw them into your development system, see how they shake out, see how they kind of compare against the other guys in the academy. It's one of the things, somebody Sporting 244 ATL, he sent in a question for us. I can respect that because I have numbers in my handle as well. He says, does MLS draft still even have value through rookie contracts or are not guaranteed or something like that? I misread that. I can't read. But MLS, the draft picks are just such a crapshoot that really, I think Atlanta United is playing this the right way, where it's like, if you want to draft players, you throw them into your development system. If not, to your point, like with what Philadelphia was doing, essentially a draft pick should be viewed as like free capital given to you from the league. The league gives you, this opportunity to, either draft a player, but you can convert those picks into capital that you could use in the form of allocation money to get Jurgen Damm under the TAM threshold or something like that. You could use it any way. So it's just, how can you manipulate that value the best you can? Maybe sometimes the best way to do it is to draft a player that you like that's on the board. But I think it's really interesting to see what Atlanta United is doing. I think it's the smart move.
I think it's smart move too. In Atlanta United, Travis Clark went back through and graded all the teams on their draft day, and Atlanta United got an A. I laughed though because Philadelphia was the only team to get an A plus. That's from Travis Clark, the guy who
scouts all the players.
Scouts all the players. He's like, nah, y'all fuck them. Okay, just your homegrowns. So maybe that's the plan eventually, but it is on a case by case basis, and I think Carlos kind of hit at that when we talked to him during the draft. I forget who asked that question, but he did kind of talk about it is on a case by case basis what they want to do. We all got to talk to Carlos, and then we got to talk to, I think this is where Joe was about to go with this.
Gosh. No, actually, I was just going to say, I thought it was kind of funny. Carlos, somebody asked him like if they, like why Bauer dropped so much or if he expected it. And he was just like, it's MLS.
Yes.
It's just the way that these things go.
That's the answer for everything.
But yeah, the real gold was
Aiden McFadden, midfielder from Notre Dame. He was just a surprise to the rest of us to be there, I think. Genuinely. He did. Yeah. He said at one point, it was like, yeah, I didn't even know I was going to get drafted today. You didn't have to enter into the draft. So I just kind of got a message that I've been drafted and got told to come here.
Get on the computer.
Cool.
And do a press conference.
Exactly. From what was clearly like the basement of his college apartment. There's like a dartboard in the background. He probably had to like shuffle all the natty lights out of the way in the background. So incredible stuff from Aiden. I think that video is out there somewhere. He had a golden press conference, and we may never hear from him again, but we'll always have that, Aiden.
Our friend Felipe Cardenas at The Athletic is from South Bend, so he's familiar with all like the college, restaurants and like pizza joints, which he seemed particularly focused on getting McFadden's opinion on what was the best pizza place. And I really appreciated McFadden's answer, which was whichever one is closest. That's the pizza place I also like. Whichever one can get pizza into my mouth the fastest. Really, like half the press conference was about how much he loves pizza.
Which is beautiful. It's just all we can ask from a new player. We're going to have to ask a lot from another new player, though. Coming in, it appears CL Merlo has confirmed this. It looks like Franco Ibarra, 19-year-old midfielder. I forget which club. Argentinos Juniors. That's what it is. Yep,
that's right.
And he will be coming in soon, we have to assume. Kind of has a little bit of 6 in him, kind of has a little bit of 8 in him. People seem a little unsure about that. There's no YouTube footage. That's
how dare you call him a 6? He's an 8. How dare you call him an 8?
Yeah, we're not doing this. There's no YouTube footage as far as I think someone found like a minor thing of him. So we don't know. We're very in the dark. How can we tell how good he is if we don't see him dribbling past people set Despacito? I don't know. We'll just have to wait.
Yeah. I have seen some like analytics account. It was Smarter Scout put out a kind of a profile of him, just like how he rates. And to me, he seems like a kind of a Mo Adams type of player, which I tweeted this yesterday. He's just kind of, I consider him like that kind of player in terms of a guy who has a lot of energy, can run around the field, can obviously get, up and down. Good tackler. He seems like he's like got a lot of bite in the tackle. I think he's picked up a couple red cards at Argentinos Juniors, maybe a little bit reckless, but I think Atlanta United could use that kind of player who wants to get stuck in. And I think more broadly, I think that this signing should be viewed less in terms of like, okay, what is Ibarra good at? Who should he play next to? What formation do we need to play in for Ibarra? Like all that kind of stuff, and just think more along the lines of, this is the kind of midfield bastard that a guy like Gabriel Heinze probably wants to have in his squad. Like he probably wants a whole squad of, not a whole squad, but he probably likes this kind of midfielder that he feels like this is a player he can develop and that kind of thing. So, and I'm sure that Heinze probably had some, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I would imagine that he would have had some input into what he thinks of him, considering that there is so little out there about Ibarra. So, yeah, I think I have no reason to think that he's going to be good or bad, really. But I think that we'll just see kind of where he fits in. I think that, again, Carlos talks about this all the time when there are new players brought in, but he will just bring competition. And so I think that will be good for players like Mo Adams, players like Eric Remedi. I think that will just kind of, it just helps everybody compete a little bit more for their place, and it makes everybody better players.
Yeah, that's kind of my gut feeling on this. It is kind of maybe not a depth piece, but someone who can at least push people. I don't think this is the last. I don't think this is the end. I don't think this is just the final point B of Atlanta United summer sign or offseason signings as far as midfielder and maybe getting in a destroyer type player. I just, in my gut, I don't think this is the end, but I may end up being very wrong about that.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that this team still could use a real press resistant player like Darlington Nagbe was. A player that, Leandro Gonzalez Perez and other players talked about this specifically, but a player that you can just give the ball to as a solution to a problem, right? Like just like give him the ball and then everything's good. That's still kind of the player that Atlanta United's missing. I think that obviously they kind of hope to have that type of player in Emerson Hyndman, and that's not working out. But if you look at the numbers right now in midfield, there are a lot of bodies there. You've got Remedi, Ibarra, who we expect to come in, Hyndman, Rossetto, Mo Adams. So like you got a lot of bodies. I'm not sure all of those guys will still be here come the start of the season. I think that you might need to move some of them out, but as to who exactly it would be, I think that I don't even know if Atlanta United would know exactly who that is right now. Just depends on what the market, on the market, and if any of those players are wanted by other teams. But there certainly are plenty of bodies there, but I think that they still could use that quality of a press resistant player, like you said.
Yeah, you got to have someone on the top in there. If you just have a bunch of average dudes, you don't really have much of anything, I don't think. So maybe Ibarra isn't average. Maybe we're wrong on that. But remember that in Heinze's system, that defensive midfielder, that one who drops back into possession, back three, is very important in distribution, everything like that. There's going to be a lot asked of our midfielders.
Yeah, and I think that Moreno has also been a player. People would categorize him as a number 8, but he's really not a player who will keep the ball. He's a player who will want to take players on and dribble. So I would categorize him differently as like an attacking midfielder, even though he might play more box to box. He's just not going to be that guy who's in that Darlington Nagbe style.
Exactly. I think that's all the news. Was that everything? I think we got everything.
I think so. Yeah. And I just spilled coffee on my keyboard. If you saw me lurch.
Wow. The magic of YouTube. This is incredible.
First show.
Just dropping shit. All right. We're not going to drop your questions. We're going to hold on to them. We're going to cling to them tightly. You guys have asked them. We're finally going to get back to answering questions right here, right now on the show. And we're going to start with a question from Matt Wojo. I missed messing up people's names in the question thing.
I know.
I love.
Well, I've already done it once today, so become a recurring theme on the show.
Of course, he asked, how big a role will Lisandro Lopez play at 37? What type of forward is he? And this is the problem with the questions I'm remembering now, because we kind of already answered this, didn't we?
Yeah. I think we've answered some of these. Scroll down on our run sheet. There's a couple more at the bottom. Actually, like 5 more we can answer. I'll read the question. Joey at Giletto asks, in terms of roster building, who are we expecting the club to part with by the end of the season? I guess we kind of already talked about that as well. It's hard to tell, really. But I think they would be willing to part with quite a bit of
just about anybody.
Yeah, like it sounds bad, but I really think they need to reduce the numbers in central midfield. Like
absolutely.
Again, with Emerson Hyndman, it's just like you would love to get rid of that salary, like if you could part with that salary, I think that it would be really nice. It would give the club a lot more options.
Dude, I saw something today that kind of freaks me out a little bit. I looked up Jordan Morris's contract in 2019 because I was trying to put something together on him for the newsletter that I do every day for MLS and the mothership. And Jordan Morris's salary in 2019 was like $690K.
Wow.
Which, I mean, is still, that's 250 short of what we think Emerson Hyndman is getting right now. Yeah. Isn't that's just, wow, neat. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Anyway, we're going to be complaining about this for years. It's going to be phenomenal. It's not his fault. It's not his fault. Yeah, no, it's cluttered. It's cluttered. There's too many. There's a log jam. There's too many people. You got to kind of clear it out and let some dudes get comfortable and let some dudes shine. And, there's just not some space for it. And if you can clear any cap room like that, then more power to you. But again, my thing with Hyman is I still don't know who's going to take him. I really, really don't know.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to find a suitor for him with that salary. So, so maybe you just roll with him and maybe try to clear space elsewhere. Who knows? But it just seems to me like the roster's a little bloated right now in
Absolutely.
some areas.
It's going to get cut, and I don't think anyone's going to be mourning too many losses. It's not going to be like the 2019 offseason where we seem to lose fan favorites every other day. It's not going to quite be that, unfortunately. But we'll see. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how this still plays out. There's just a long way to go. It feels like everything's so weird right now. Everything's just so weird right now.
Yeah, it is. We are still like kind of in a holding pattern because of that CBA situation. And I really think once that gets solved, I think we're going to start seeing deals go left and right. I think we're going to really start seeing things happen. But until then, it's just hard for teams to kind of really plan and know what not only for the salary this year, but down the road, because that's really what this impacts.
Well, even going back to what Seattle was talking about, their GM Garth Lagerwey was talking about, we didn't really have any money.
Right.
I mean, what? y'all just went to MLS Cup and lost, but still, I mean, they got that far with one of the best teams in the league, probably easily the best team in the league, and they didn't have any money, and they're like, we needed these two signings we just gave away to get us back into the right spot. So if they're struggling right now, you can imagine what other teams are doing as they try to figure out and navigate what's going on. It's interesting, which kind of leads us to this next question, but go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was thankfully, because we have an owner like Arthur Blank, who's just has such massive amounts of wealth. Thankfully, we being Atlanta United are not in that situation where it's like you have to make a literal budget. That there's there's an operating budget essentially for this team that is plentiful. So we're in a good spot.
Which leads us to the next thing from Jeff Akana, who says, can you guys discuss the likelihood of the remaining possibility of a Marino paydown plus DP signing? And this is where my thought comes in with Ibarra potentially just being kind of a depth piece. I think the DP signing is going to come. I think that plan to buy Moreno has been in the works for a while. I don't think the DP is Eric Lopez, which I think some people have suggested. I really, really don't. I hope not. I think the next thing's coming.
Well, now that we have some more details reporting from Tenorio, it really does feel like Eric Lopez will be slotted in as one of those U22 players. Like that makes total sense now. Now that we know what the details of that U22 initiative are. I mean, I think that Marino, I think that he will get paid down if they find that player to bring in. I don't think that that's necessarily 100% the case that that's going to happen. It seems like Thiago or Agustin Almendra is going to be staying at Boca. Atlanta United lost out in the Moises Caicedo sweepstakes. So they're, they haven't gotten a couple players that we think they were targeting. So if that player that they really trust, and these DP signings are obviously super important for like what we were just discussing with Garth Lagerwey, like these have real money impacts. If they can't find that player, then they don't have to buy down Moreno, like they just won't. But and that would give them more flexibility in the middle of the roster to sign somebody. But I think that if they do find that player that they really want, that will happen. I think that essentially it will be possible to pay Moreno down if they need to do that,
which I think they kind of need to. So
I do too. We talked about it. We both think that that kind of press resistant player will be a DP player essentially.
You would hope so. It also kind of leads us to our next thing from Total Football, which I think this is one of the most interesting questions we've been asked in a while. So thank you, TF. He asked, what's something you think the team will be worse at in 2021 compared to 2020? And my initial thought was nothing. And then I went, goalkeeper? Question mark?
Maybe.
Brad Gazan's like a year older.
Just getting a little older. Yeah.
Why not? Yeah. Right. Other than that, God, if this team is worse at really anything, something's gone wrong. Right?
My answer to this question is discipline, like in terms of bookings and things like that. I think that this team you'll see guys get sent off more. More yellow card suspensions, things like that with, with the nature of Gabriel Heinze, the way that, both tactically and just personally, the way he wants his teams to play. That's what I would think. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing.
I was about to say, is that detriment?
Yeah, but in terms of like, on the score sheet or on the, the stat sheet, technically it's worse, I guess, to get red cards. So
we talked about Franco Ibarra's discipline record too. It was very Leandro Gonzalez Perez-esque, which is both exciting and terrifying at the same time. So, but I'm here for it, honestly, like you said. And I think we talked about it a lot. Again, going back to the thing where Carlos Carmona was such a fun player to kind of take part in watching and to see him do things on the field that were just screwing with people, essentially. It was a blast. And so to have that kind of edge again is going to be fun. I think that's a good call, Joe. I like that. Next question comes to someone who will not be on the field because we finally figured out what's going on with this. And I'm glad someone asked this because I think everyone has been asking this who's kind of attached to the team and wants to know what's the next step. Scott Howerton asked, what's going on with Gutman? Do you think he'll be in camp, stay with Celtic, or was it just a rights move?
Yeah.
It was just a rights move.
Yeah, essentially. Carlos Bocanegra addressed this during the press conference he did after the draft, saying that essentially they have his rights, but he's still a Celtic player right now. That said, there was a report from a very questionable account saying that he will be leaving Celtic like in June, or I guess that would be at the end of their season. I've been thinking about that a little bit more, and I think that here's my theory behind the Gutman thing. When he was first signed, people were like immediately like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on with Bello?" Because it seems like he would be like the replacement. I think having Gutman's MLS rights is like the Bello cover, where if a team comes in the summer and makes Atlanta United an offer that they can't refuse for Bello, like a $10 to $15 million offer, then at least you have Gutman there where you can go and buy Gutman and bring him to the team. And especially if Celtic go and, he's out of contract, then that would work too. But I think that he's kind of the backup cover for Bello, and not necessarily like the planned replacement, or at least the way that people were thinking about it when the deal initially went down. That's my thinking. I
think it's a great thought. I think it's a very good thought. Do have some news on Bello. I believe I'm saying this right. I think I looked at it very, very quickly, but him and Miles Robinson called up to the USMNT team. Am I correct?
Yeah, they're in the roster. We don't know if they'll play in the game yet against Trinidad and Tobago this week, or maybe it's next week. I forget when the game is. I think it's
the 31st, I think is when it is.
Okay. But yeah, hopefully they get to play. I hope. Can't wait to see him. I mean, I think it's been a long time coming Miles has already made an appearance for the national team, but a long time coming for Bello, even though he's only 19 years old now. But
hopefully
he deserved it when he was 16 years old. Damn it! No, good for him. I'm really happy for him.
Exactly, and that's becoming a very crowded position at fullback for the U.S. It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of progresses as he goes, and I think he's facing off against people like Julian Araujo and the kid from Fulham, whose name I can't remember right now, and other people. So Anthony Robinson, that's it.
Robinson, yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that goes going forward. Keep in mind that there's always going to be fun rumors popping up about him as we kind of move forward, which is a good tease for an interview I did with Tom Bogert of the Mothership, who does all of the transfer news for MLS and has become a big voice in that. Check out that interview when you get a chance. I don't think we're doing that at the end of this episode. Maybe we are.
No, I'm gonna throw it on. That'll be in the second part. We're about to go to break. I'll just finish it up here. We're about to throw it to break, and we'll come back with what did you talk about with Tom? I haven't even listened to it yet.
We wanted you, the dear listeners, dear readers, to have a media literacy grasp of transfers in the transfer market and not paying attention to people like Will Forbes, quotation marks, if that is his real name, and other things like that. We wanted
Charlie Kennan.
We wanted you to understand the transfer process from a media perspective and hopefully have you be a little more educated on how to parse through all the noise that comes with transfer season. Not to say that it isn't fun to follow every single rumor, but it can also lead to stomach ulcers, and we don't want that. So,
well, that's perfect. It's perfect considering the situation Atlanta United's in right now.
Exactly.
Want to say also before we go to break, just shout out to Lucid FC, who continues to be a great sponsor, presenting sponsor of this podcast for us. Check them out at lucidfc.us. They're going to have new lines of clothes and all kinds of stuff coming out this year. there may still be a sale, and I don't even know it off the top of my head from their winter Christmas type sale. So, but anyways, check them out. You can follow them at Lucid FC. Just search it on Twitter. I'm sure you'll find it. They've got cool stuff they put out occasionally. So, looking forward to what they've got next, and thank you to them for continuing to be a great partner for us. So, with that out of the way, let's throw it to break and then get to Sam's interview with Tom Bogert.